Okay, you're listening to Seismic Radio, and we are looking at the book of Romans, and we are working our way fast to the last couple of chapters in the book of Romans, and we are now in chapter 13. And today we're just going to look verses 8 to 10. And I'm just going to read it, and it says, "Owe no one anything except to love each other. For the one who loves another has fulfilled the law. For the commandments, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not covet, and any other commandment are summed up in this word, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Love does no wrong to a neighbor, therefore love is a fulfilling of the law." Okay, if you are familiar with the New Testament, Jesus talks about the first commandments and the most important commandments, and he says, first of all, love the Lord thy God with all your heart, all your mind, and with everything, and then love your neighbor as yourself. And he makes a point that those two are the biggest commandments, the biggest law. Now Paul goes one step further, and he says everything is just summed up. The law is summed up in this commandment: you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Okay. So quickly go through the text. So first it comes up, owe no one anything. It's quite interesting as well. And we are living in an era of the credit card, of buying on tick, of spending some money on interest, or a lot of money on interest sometimes, to get by. And sometimes it's just the way our society works these days. It's almost inevitable. For example, if you, depending where you live, if you want to work, you need a car. You haven't got the money to buy yourself a car, so you need to take out a loan to buy the car so you can travel to work. And so you can make the money to pay for the car. And it's some sort of strange Babylonian system where by the time you're finished with your car, you've paid about 1.5 times the amount the car's worth to, first of all, to the people who produce the car, and then to the people who lent you the money to buy the car. And it's not necessarily the best system. And also, horror story, the car gets written off or gets stolen or whatever. And there are some problems with the insurance, or they refuse to pay out, and then suddenly you owe a lot of money, but you really haven't got the product, and you owe something for what you haven't got. The whole economy seems to work on making debts. So it's all to do with investment. So you make an investment, you buy a machine, you borrow some money, the machine makes some money, and providing everything goes right, you pay it back. And then eventually you make a profit. So there's a positive element as well. So once it's paid back, you make a profit. So once your car's paid off, you're de facto driving for free. How should we, obviously Paul makes, it's almost like a rhetoric statement he's making here, where he says, the big thing here is about love. Don't owe anything to anybody other than, that you need to love them, that you owe them love. So he doesn't really make a statement about credit cards, just to get this straight, primarily. But it's interesting what he writes in here, and maybe we could learn a lesson or two from this. Okay, how should we go about this in living? I think we should just be wise, and we should be clever. We shouldn't sort of hopelessly go into debt for example, for consumer goods or for anything like that. If we invest because we need a car, but to some extent, some people say if you buy a house and you pay off your house over a period of 25 years, you pay it about 2 or 3 times over in what you pay in interest, depending what the interest rates are. But then on the other side, if you rent a house, you may pay an equivalent amount of money, and you pay for 20 or 30 years the same amount of money, and you don't have anything at the end of it. So there are arguments both ways if you look at it financially. What I would encourage you really is to be prudent, to live within your means. I think that's maybe one lesson you can take from this little statement, even though, again, I'm sure that the way it is meant originally was just a rhetoric point Paul is making here. But nevertheless, I think we should live within our means. We should avoid entering into debt if we can. As I say, there are some circumstances where it's maybe wise to enter into debt or to go. I mean, for example, you don't have a car, you can't go to work, you're not making any money, you will impoverish very soon. For example, it depends on what your circumstances are. But then there are the other extremes as well. I can buy a car, where I have to pay for 10 years, which is really expensive. Or I can buy a car that'll, a little bit cheaper, but it'll, just do the job, and I get it paid off in 1 or 2 years as opposed to 10 years. Yeah. But I've got a flashy, fancy car, that's really nice and beautiful or whatever. I used to take, talking about this car story, I used to take pride to drive around in old cars, and even though my car, only cost me a few £100 and spent a lot of time and work and, doing it up, and if you calculate or if you take this work into consideration, it'd probably be much more expensive than the cash I paid for it. But I thought very often that I'm driving this car, like for one car, I think I was driving for about 4 years or so. And it was basically free motoring. I didn't have a bill at the end of the month where I had to pay a credit company or a bank a lot of money. But I was just driving around in it. Yeah, it was de facto free, no problems. And I thought, all the other people I'm seeing around, with flashy, nice, beautiful cars, probably the majority of them, they've got very hefty bills at the end of the day. And there are some companies like banks or loan companies, car loan companies, who are getting very, very rich out of it at the end, where people pay whatever the car's worth several times over, maybe once over, twice over, and so on. Anyway, just to sum it up, this little point: try to stay within your means in your living. Try to be prudent in the way you live and in the way you deal with your finance. Don't follow into the trap. People are laying out in front of you to, consume and to consume even more, to max your debt out or to max your credit out to the brim. But try and adjust your living standards to not create headaches for yourself. Yeah. Okay, the only debt which we should have for other people is to love each other. And Paul says here, the one who loves has fulfilled the law. And we can go to Corinthians as well. There's a whole chapter on loving, on what love is. And it's 1 Corinthians, that's where you can find it. And it is actually quite deep, when you look at this. And I think love is very misunderstood. Let me just go there. And then we can, quickly go through this love chapter because, Paul talks in Romans all about love. Let me just, I'm just here on the computer, so I'm going to go through it. It's, love is, I think it's these days is misunderstood. A lot of people, when they talk about love, they look at love erotically, but that's not it. That's not what we are talking about when we look at the Bible. Love is a lot more. It's a lot deeper, and it's a lot purer as well, than what very often is suggested by the world. And just to put it in general terms, there's a lot of self-denial in love. Love is putting the interests of the other person over your own interests, and to look for the best, to look out for the other person. And what I find is sometimes love, true, genuine love, is expressed in extreme situations. When I was talking to my granddad very often, he was in the war, and he was, for many years, he was living a life where he didn't know whether he would survive the next day. And he saw lots of his friends die in this war. And what you find is that the people have to stick together to survive. And there's suddenly big, really big bonds between comrades. They know if that guy next to me doesn't look out for me, I'll be dead. So I'm doing everything to make sure that he's okay. And that's a little bit the mentality. And people build friendships which are very, very deep. If you go to 1 Corinthians chapter 13, there's this description of what love is. And let me just quickly read from verse 4. And it says, love suffers long and is kind. Love does not envy. Love does not parade itself. It is not puffed up. It does not behave rudely. It does not seek its own. It's not provoked. Thinks no evil. Does not rejoice in iniquity, but rejoices in the truth. Bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never fails. Okay, that's a chapter. Let me just go through it again. It's very deep. It's a lot of stuff in here as well. So love suffers long, was long-suffering, is patient, and is kind. Love does not envy. Love does not parade itself. It is not puffed up. It does not behave rudely. Does not seek its own, is not provoked, thinks no evil, does not rejoice in iniquity, but rejoices in the truth, bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never fails. It's deep, If I go through each of one, love is patient. It waits for people. It doesn't. It's not rushed or anything. It's just patient. It's there. It's something which is in the background, which is undisturbed and cannot be disturbed, and it's just like a solid rock. It is kind. I think this is probably self-explanatory. Love is kind. It seeks somebody else's good. It seeks to benefit somebody else. It doesn't seek to turn him down, to give somebody else a hard time, but it seeks to build him up, to be kind. Love does not envy, so there's no envy in love. It does not parade itself, so there's no pride, there's no showing off kind of thing. It's just something silently in the background. It's not puffed up, does not behave rudely, does not seek its own. It's interesting as well. So love is not, and we find this sometimes when people get married. They get married not for what they can give to the other person, but very often is what they can get out of it themselves. So it might be the sexual thing. It might be, that a bloke wants a trophy wife, or that a woman wants, a rich man, or a powerful husband, or something. It might be all sorts of reasons which are not right, but really it should be something where it does not seek its own, where it seeks, the welfare of the other person more than its own welfare. It is not provoked. It thinks no evil, does not rejoice in iniquity, but rejoices in the truth. So love and truth are mixed together. They are related together. There's no lying in love. There's no pretense. In true love, you bear yourself to the other person. You open yourself up to the other person. It bears all things. It accepts, if pressure comes, if hard times come, it bears those things. That's what love is all about. Believes all things. And our belief is not being stupid and trusting every lie, but belief is more. It's a relationship. The Greek word belief has got a maybe different connotation slightly to what we find in English or in modern languages. It's to do with trust. It's to do with putting your confidence into another person. So that's really where this goes to. And it hopes all things and endures all things. So that's love. And then it says love never fails. Let's go back to Romans. Now, that's what Paul is talking about here in Romans chapter 13, verse 8. Except love each other, for the one who loves another has fulfilled the law. So in loving one another, you have fulfilled the law. Now, how do I love one another if I haven't got the emotions? And it's sometimes hard, isn't it? Especially, loving is easy. It's like you are in the war, you've got people who, hold you back free, and they fight for you. They make sure that you're okay. They look after you because there's this big pressure. And in that context, it's fairly easy to love one another, but very often we are coming across very unlovable people. And I used to work for many years as a teacher or as a lecturer, and I had students who were very annoying, to say the least. Some of them were just, a real pain. They didn't want to learn. their aim seemed to be is they were put into a context of authority where for 1.5 hours they had to, listen to a guy at the front who was running the show. In that case, that was me, and they didn't like it. So they had to make a show of themselves and make my life very difficult. All I was doing was a job to try and transfer knowledge. What these guys were doing was just trying to make my job as difficult as possible. It's hard to love these people, but how do we deal with this? When we've got unlovable people, actually pains in the butt kind of people, and the answer is it's a decision. It's a decision you make in your heart, and you have to decide in your heart that you want to love a particular person, and that you are not seeking their downfall, but that you're seeking their welfare. And it's sometimes very, very hard, when people materialize as enemies or as people who hate you or who just disrespect you or who try to make your life as difficult as possible. It's really, really hard, and trust me in that. How can we do this? How can we make this decision and follow it through? I mean, the first one is we need to understand the love of God, and we need to open our hearts to God to pour out His love into our lives and into our hearts. And the second one is we need to be able to forgive. And I know out of my heart it is very hard to forgive when people do wrong. And immediately when something happens, by nature I try to look for revenge, and it has to be a conscious decision where you just try to give it over to God and ask Him to take over and to seek Him to enable you to forgive a particular person who has done wrong to you, so that the love of God can flow freely through you, and that your decision to love an unlovable person will be followed through by genuine and true love from God. And Paul goes further and he says, "Who loves another has fulfilled the law." So if you love somebody, you have fulfilled the law. The law becomes superfluous almost. You shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not covet, and so on. They're all summed up in this word: you shall love your neighbor as yourself. And it's true. I mean, if you love your neighbor, I mean, you might have the prettiest wife in the in the town, and she might cast her eyes on you, and the little sparks are flying. But if you love your neighbor, if you love her husband, you're not going to, pull through with this. You're not going to pursue this woman because you love your neighbor. You wouldn't do it to him because it would break his heart. It would break his life. It would drive him to desperation if his beautiful wife left him. Because you have cast your eyes on her, and the sparks are flying, and where love goes, and the other love, erotic love goes, and that's a problem. But obviously, if you love, that guy, you wouldn't do anything. You wouldn't want to do anything but to him. You wouldn't want to, throw him into turmoil because of your desires. You shall not murder. The same thing. If you love, you don't murder. You shall not steal. If you love somebody, you respect somebody else's property, and you're not taking from them. You shall not covet. Same thing. Love overrides it. Covet is like, why have you got it and I haven't? I want what you've got. That's covetousness. And obviously, if you love somebody, you'll say, okay, you've got riches and you've got, fancy things. Good on you. And if you love that person, you can live with that without a problem. And trust me, I've asked myself very often this question. I've had periods in my life where I was really poor, really, really poor. And I've seen other people who, they weren't Christians, they were godless, and they were doing really well. And I asked myself, why them and not I? And it's sometimes hard, when covetousness comes in and you have to deal with this. But, let love rule your life, not covetousness. And there's a big difference. If love is there, you can live with it. It doesn't bother you that much. And any other commandment are summed up in this word: you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Love does no wrong to a neighbor. Therefore, love is a fulfilling of the law. Love does no wrong to a neighbor. And we are talking about genuine love from God, not about sexual love or other love. If you love somebody, if you're good, if you're kind, you will not want to do wrong to anybody. And and if it overrides your mentality, and if your mentality is soaked in love, it'll make a difference. Therefore, love is the fulfilling of the law. Okay, I want to finish on one thing, and I think in this talk on Romans, I've mentioned it before, I've met two people in my life. And there was one preacher, I don't even know his name. It's many, many years ago. It's probably about 30 years ago when I met this guy. And he was very prophetic, and I still remember the prophecies he spoke over my life. There were just a couple of scriptures. I still remember them. There was one from Galatians, and I think there was one from Isaiah. It didn't make sense to me at the time, but later it did make sense to me, sort of years later down the line. But funnily enough, I don't remember his name. But one thing which struck me about this guy, when he entered a room, there was just this atmosphere of love. I've never seen anything like it up to that point in time. The guy entered the room, and the room was just, filled with a sense of tranquility. You could sense the love he had for you, and you could sense the love of God in that very room. It really stuck with me more than anything else. I can't even remember what he looks like. Don't know his name. I know some of the words he had given me at the time. I think I was 16 years old at the time. And I remember, this event of what took place and how amazing it was. It was just a traveling preacher, so he came to the church, and he was there for, I think, a week or so, and then he moved on. The other occasion was in the Ukraine, where I was involved with trying to help with the church out there. And there was one lady who was sort of involved in the ministry they had, and we were going to the town where she was working, and we stayed at her apartment for a couple of hours. And her grandmother, and that was quite interesting, her grandmother was just a very old woman. She could barely see. She was not in a very good way. She had very high blood pressure, and I'm not sure whether she's still alive. It's a few years ago now. But her call to eternity is not far off. But one thing which struck me about this grandmother is that she just oozed out love. When you were in her presence, you could just sense the love of God. She couldn't communicate very well, and she only said a few words, and she tried to make a bit of conversation. But there was just love, big, deep love coming out of her. Old Russian babushka with a big heart and lots of love. And it's interesting as well. I mean, there were all the great events and great words and great ministries and during this time when I was there. But when I look back, the only thing which really stuck out was this old woman, and she probably doesn't know, what she has done. This old woman, who was physically in a very poor condition, and probably didn't have much more time left in her. But one thing, I could sense was just this deep and thorough love she had for, the people who came there and the visitors who were there in the home. It was absolutely amazing. I want to close on this, and I just want to encourage you to embrace this love. I mean, I know I'm not there where, Russian babushka is. And I'm not there where this man with this prophetic ministry who came, 30 years ago and spoke to me, spoke to lots of other people as well. And I only had a short encounter with him, but it left a deep impact on me, so that even 30 years down the line, I remember this guy very, very well. And saying all that, I don't remember his name, not exactly what he looks like, but I remember what he said, and I remember that very thing. He entered a room and you could just feel the tranquility and the atmosphere of love coming in with him. And I mean, I'm sure you've experienced something similar, maybe the opposite way around, that certain people enter a room and the atmosphere just drops down, and it, they almost bring the chills into a room. Or on the positive note as well, where people just light up a room when they enter in. And what I would like to encourage you, let's strive to be like these two guys, like babushka, Russian babushka, or I think he was British, I'm not sure, British minister, British pastor, who was there in my life like 20, 30 years ago. Just aspire, or try to aspire to be a little bit more like them. if you can, and wherever you are, just, pray and seek God and ask God to let His love, His divine, great, genuine, pure love flow through your life, and that other people's lives will be touched with the love you've got. And that's something amazing. I mean, in the end, we are Christians. We've got the Spirit of God in our lives. We've got direct access to God through the Spirit of God. And what we need to do is we just need to allow God to pour out His love into our hearts abundantly, and to let Him do it. And I know God wants to do it. And that's all He wants to do it. And we need to open up our hearts for it and just let it flow through our hearts out to other people. Just be kind to them, be good to them. It starts off with wanting to be a loving person. And it carries on with opening yourself up and letting the love of God flow through your life. And then step number 3 is to just open your heart and letting it flow out to the people around you. And then, I think that's the last statement. Therefore, love is a fulfilling of the law. You love, the law is fulfilled. That's how easy it is. What a glorious gospel we have in Jesus Christ. Let me just pray, and then we'll close on this. Lord, I want to thank You for Your love, and I want to thank You for, Lord, that You have poured out Your love into our hearts. I pray for all the listeners to this talk, however few or however many it may be, that You will just resonate with them, that You will just open their hearts and pour out their love into their hearts. I pray, Lord, place a big desire into their hearts, into our hearts, Lord, for the love of God, for Your love to flow through our being, Lord. Let us be like the babushka in Dniepropetrovsk, or the preacher man, Lord, back in Paderborn. Let us be like these guys, and let us just ooze out Your love. And Lord, let us be loving people in a world that is full of hatred, in a world that is full of evil, Lord, where people have lost the plot, where they don't understand love anymore, and where love is being lost. I mean, Your word says in these last days, the love of many will grow cold. I pray, Lord, that You will raise up people, and the people, as they experience in this world just a coldness of hearts, that they will, Lord, experience in the people who are called by Your name a warmth and a true, undiluted, genuine love, the love of God. I thank You, Lord, what You have done for us, Lord, that You have called us, Lord, to be Your servants and Your ministers here on earth, and that we can, Lord, that we've got access to this great love, Lord. Help us to pass it on to the people in this world. Permeate our being with Your love, and just let it flow out of us. In Jesus' name I pray, God. Amen. Okay, God bless, and all the best. So if you want to check us out, you can do this at www.seismicradio.org, or you can contact us at info@seismicradio.org. God bless and bye-bye from Michael here at Seismic Radio.